Hello, everybody. I'm glad you are here today. My name is Kevin Cote, and today we will be talking about the Cryptid Camp trading card game official rulebook, the first rulebook for Cryptid Camp, and the simplified, public, compressed version of it, according to my browser here. If you do not know me, I make card game content, but before I make some card game content, or I guess after I made some content, I was the MetaZoo Games #1 R&D director for about 2 years. A year and 8 months, I believe. And I worked on MetaZoo Games for, about Nightfall to native development. I won't go into exact cards I made, but I made hundreds of cards, designed them, and worked with the team on it. So it was an awesome experience, definitely life-changing, and I do love the original MetaZoo that Mike Waddell made, and I am looking forward to MetaZoo 2 under Charlie and the new team. I'm looking to support that, looks really good. But, Cryptid Camp also looks good, and to be honest with you, I have kept in touch, and I'm friends with people who made Cryptid Camp, so disclaimer there. So, I know the people who work with the game. To put it in perspective, let's scroll all the way down here. So, I actually don't know Bailey. Bailey and Erica, I actually don't know them personally. I don't think I met them ever while working for MetaZoo. I know they're influencers. I know they seem all right, so, good luck to them. But Emilio Soto, he was the R&D director who took over MetaZoo Games #1 after me. Amazing guy. Elliot Evans, COO, amazing guy as well. So he worked as the MetaZoo Games OP director. God, they're gonna kill me if I get their titles wrong in MetaZoo Games. But he worked with MetaZoo Games OP and also did some card designs. People may or may not know that too, but he did work on like Frost and Earth as well. Gabriel Time Martinez, he was a playtester for MetaZoo, also a great guy, and he is now the R&D director of Cryptid Camp. Very proud of him, by the way. And he, was a playtester and also a master metazoologist. Andrew McBride, he did work with MetaZoo as the, it was graphic design. I don't know its exact title. I think it was lead of graphic design towards the end. It wasn't lead at first, but then became lead after, I believe. And I also have a good rapport with a lot of the artists here. Anella, she was a fan artist in MetaZoo for a while, has been associated, but also known as Nelly, so know her. Obviously know Kelsey. Pepper is a good friend. So, yeah, the point is, all of this intro is a disclaimer that I know a lot of people who made Cryptid Camp, and part of the reason I am supporting Cryptid Camp, I actually already backed it at the $200 tier already with a couple playmats, is that I want to support my friends and people who I cared about, my coworkers in the past. Now, that said, all the thoughts I will be saying in this video, which is me talking about my honest opinions on the Cryptid Camp initial rulebook, are completely my own. No one from Cryptid Camp, knows me, that I'm creating these kind of video, and that I will be creating like videos like this. But I wanted to give honest thoughts on the current rulebook of Cryptid Camp, what I think the gameplay of Cryptid Camp is going to be, because lots of people already make content already on, hey, this looks cool, invest in it, buy in it. But I'm trying to make more gameplay-oriented videos on these smaller indie card games like Cryptid Camp. Eventually, MetaZoo, MetaZoo 2, probably going to be supporting that. And also, I like other card games like Chronicles of Arcane, which you can find videos of in my channel, and I will keep making gameplay videos of that in my channel. But yeah, I'm just trying to say this initial intro that I am biased because I know people from this team, and they're also my friends, some of them. But that said, all my honest critique of the Cryptid Camp rulebook and the current cards and the gameplay is completely my own, as is. And I do it with the best interest. I do it with, I want this game to succeed, because people I know are in it. But also, I do think it looks cool. I do think it can offer something different, something MetaZoo hasn't offered yet. And I'm kind of in an unpopular camp, to be honest with you. If I'm going to be unfiltered here, I actually think all these indie card games can succeed. I think there's a market for all of them. Cryptid Camp, MetaZoo 2, Chronicles of Kane, whatever. I think they all can succeed. And I also want them all to succeed as long as they have the best interest of the community and are doing something that's unique, different, and, passionate, wholesome. So I do want to support all these games monetarily when I can, and also by making videos like this. But anyways, that's my disclaimer before I really go super in depth on gameplay of this rulebook. Yeah, I'm biased, but that said, all my thoughts of the rulebook, what could be better, what's not working so far, and what's already good, it's completely my own. So yeah, but yeah, so. And yeah, if you don't already know what Cryptid Camp is, it's basically a new trading card game, of course, on cryptids. A lot of the old MetaZoo 1 team went to Cryptid Camp as artists or designers of the game. And yeah, I mean, it has a lot of similarities. I'll be talking a lot about the similarities of Cryptid Camp and MetaZoo 1 in this video. And yeah, part of the video is me talking about the similarities of the original MetaZoo and Cryptid Camp, but at the same time, I actually want to focus on the differences and unique things Cryptid Camp kind of offers in a TCG realm as is. I have given the Cryptid Camp rulebook number 1 a read through, pretty good. Read all the words I could. Kind of skimmed the lore a little bit because I'm mostly a nerd in the gameplay. But having said that, I think I can talk okay enough on the current game as is. Not as an expert, but as a very rough first impressions of the rulebook and what I've noticed initially. But yeah, so again, you don't have to watch the whole video. I'm gonna rant a lot. I guess not rant, but I'm going to talk a lot about the rulebook and various gameplay stuff. So please skip ahead, and I will be doing some initial critiques of how I think the power level of some of these signature cards, like Mothman, is going to be without playing the game, just very initial impressions. So yeah, hopefully you enjoy this Cryptid Camp gameplay-based video. Okay, so we got the rulebook here. The first thing to notice is it's already kind of a long rulebook. I mean, card games in general, like Magic and Pokemon the like, they tend to be longer rulebooks, talking like 20 pages, but it's still kind of important to note. It is 20 pages. Now, it is a official rulebook, what you would call a comprehensive or standard rulebook. So we would want it to be, about 20 pages. It should provide us all the detail we need, but there isn't really a quick start guide. I mean, if we scroll down already to page 4, there's a quick start guide, but it's not really a solid quick start guide. It's not really much images to show, how things should be done. A good quick start guide will have lots of graphics, images, like, hey, shuffle the cards here, place it in this order. It's pretty much written out. So your layman person, we have to understand your average card gamer. I'm not saying average card gamer is dumb, right? Because they can, card games can be hard to play and the like, but, card games is a lot of information. There's a lot of information in a card game. And, the average person these days doesn't read a lot. Lots of people are on their phones and not thinking very critically on what they're reading. People are, even though books are still popular as a form of medium, it's really short form content and quickly absorbing information without critical thinking that is, the average person is consuming. And card games are the opposite. Card games want you to really think about wordings, think critically about what you're playing, and that makes them a little hard for people to get into. It's also one of the good things about card games, which is their complexity and how interesting situations can kind of develop. But that said, The Quickstart guide is not super good right now. I would like more graphics on a Quickstart guide. And by the way, everything I'm saying right now, all these critiques I'm saying, these can all be improved upon. Like we have to understand that the first iteration of a rulebook of any card game is going to be super rough. Magic the Gathering had a lot of errors in the beginning. Yu-Gi-Oh had a lot of errors in the beginning. And cards will get errata, all the like. So we have to give every new indie card game a little bit of a break, in their first set. And the thing about rulebooks is you don't really know what's missing until people who don't play the game actually play the game and read the rulebook and find what's wrong. We have to kind of give some credit to Cryptid Camp, or at least a little bit of patience, because they have a lot of interesting new mechanics, which I will discuss, and we kind of need to just be patient with a new game like this. So anyways, yeah, so we have this rulebook here, and it has a lot of stuff, quick start guide, all that kind of stuff. Introduction to the game, not really gameplay related, but it does do a good job of talking about, hey, these are the kind of the cards we're going to see in the game. The cabins are basically factions in the game. 8 factions. I think 8's kind of interesting. MetaZoo had 10 colors, 10 auras, if you will. And Pokemon has a ton of auras. I think it has like at least 11 in the current game. I haven't played the Pokemon TCG a little bit, but I think it has like 11 or 10 colors. 8 is interesting. It makes it like kind of an octagon kind of style. And they don't really say in the intro if you can play with dual cabins, if you can play with dual colors yet. Probably they're going to make dual colors at some point. But I do think playing with dual colors in this game is a little difficult on release, which I will talk about why that is later on. But basically, okay, so if you don't know anything about Cryptid Camp, the basic premise is you are a camper and you are essentially finding cryptids, finding evidence for them, and unlocking memories and, the stuff like that. You're basically discovering cryptids as is and going on that journey. And I actually like a lot of the gameplay elements for how thematic it is to discover cryptids, like in finding evidence and how the battles ensues, stuff like that. And we'll go over that soon. The land resource, I guess you can call it, in this game are the lanterns, which give vision of the cryptids. So that's kind of cool. Memories, that's kind of your actions in the game. Supplies, like equipment, stuff like that. So it's kind of, it's kind of thematic in how they weave all these gameplay elements in there. There's not really much for me to critique off this. It's pretty standard stuff, lore for a card game. Again, here we have the quick start guide, like I said before. So something to note is that we have 50 cards in Cryptid Camp. Your main deck is 50 cards. I don't know of many popular TCGs with 50 cards in the deck. We see Yu-Gi-Oh with 40 cards and Magic with 60 cards. Pokemon with 60 cards as well. 50 cards is kind of an interesting number. The thing about 50 cards compared to 40 cards or 60 card decks is 50 cards tends to give you more, you're going to have more variance inside of your deck list compared to a 40 card deck. 40 card decks tend to be pretty consistent when built correctly, especially if you have multiple copies of cards in your deck. So with 50 cards, you're going to be less likely to see a card that is 1 per deck, which in this game we will see there are cards from 1 per deck to 4 per deck. So unlike MetaZoo or Yu-Gi-Oh, you're going to find those 1 per deck cards a little less often with 50 cards. Now that said, it's not 60 cards either. So with 60 cards, part of the reason why 60 card games work is you can put 4 copies of it in your deck. But with 50 cards, we're gonna see, like, if you compared this game to Yu-Gi-Oh, for instance, you will be able to see your common cards more often in Yu-Gi-Oh because you can run 4 copies of cards per deck. But whereas Yu-Gi-Oh can only run 3 copies of cards per deck, but it's 40 cards. And you will be able to see your common cards more often also compared to Magic and Pokemon, because those games have 60 cards and you can run 4 copies of it per deck, whereas in this game you can also run 4 copies of cards, but it's 50 cards. So this game is in general more consistent for the common cards you will see if it's 4 copies of it, and a little less consistent for those 1 or 2 per deck kind of cards. So I don't know, little bit of a ramble there on deck count and consistency. Deck count kind of gives less cards in deck, more consistent usually, more cards in deck, more variance you're gonna have. So it's kind of a little interesting medium. Also interesting for card sleeves. If you were to sleeve your deck, normally if I buy a Dragon Shield box, it's like 100 sleeves you're gonna have. So I can usually do 2. If I'm playing a 40 card format like Yu-Gi-Oh or something, I can do 2 40 card decks pretty easily with my Dragon Shield box. With this game, it's a little harder to do that since I have actually more than 50 cards in the deck. I have 50 cards in my deck, but I also have my 10 lanterns, my 10 lands, which we'll talk about soon. That's 60 cards. And then I have my trails, which I believe are also standard card size. So if that's the case, I have 66 cards in the deck. It's pretty interesting. You have 66 cards in the deck. 66. Cannot say that word. So that is something to think about in terms of sleeving and shuffling. But yeah, so pretty standard. You have a main deck, which is your 50 card deck in this game. You also have your lanterns. Your lanterns are your land in this game. If you've played the game Argent Saga at all, shout out to Damian Hardy for working on Argent Saga. Or if you played Hearthstone, the lands in this game are basically like you get 1 per turn. Okay, so kind of like Hearthstone or Argent Saga, you're just gonna get a land per turn. It's consistent. This, I'm not gonna say it's better or worse like the Hearthstone mechanic or just getting a land per turn. I'm not saying it's better or worse than Magic's land system. Is actually a very strong argument to be made that neither getting 1 land per turn guaranteed versus getting the Magic land system of customizing your deck is better or worse. But I will say that this lantern system, the Hearthstone if you will, like once per turn land, it does lower the curve, the difficulty curve of deck building for new players. One of the hardest things I've seen that new players to card games kind of have a hard time understanding if you play like Magic at all or Pokemon even, is understanding how much land or energy resources to put in a deck, because it's not really easy initially thinking, oh, land's important, right? And it's hard for a new player to think, oh, I have to play land cards in my deck actually, because if I don't play land cards, I can't play the game. It's hard to think about that. A lot of people don't get gravitated to land. They get gravitated towards creatures and big spells, right? But particularly creatures. So having this kind of lantern system, in my opinion, it's better for new players coming into a card game because they don't have to think about one part of the game, one deck building. They only have to think about, hey, I played a game and I'm going to be able to play this thing on turn 5 if it's 5 cost, So that makes it pretty consistent. The trails, we're going to talk about the trails a little bit later on, but the trails are interesting. They are basically cards that will activate effects if someone else, looks at them. But the thing is, we don't have any examples of trails on the initial rulebook or the Kickstarter page. Maybe there's some trails I missed out from the Collecticon. I didn't look at the Collecticon spoilers too much, to be honest with you. But in the rulebook right now, there are no trail cards. So that's something to talk about. There's no examples, images of some cards in this initial rulebook. So that should be talked about, improved upon. You also have your one unique cryptid companion in your companion zone, according to the Quickstart guide. So that makes things a little interesting. They haven't really said much about the companion rules right now in the game. I think it's any. Okay, so it has to be a unique cryptid. So basically, it's kind of like a legendary creature in Magic the Gathering, um, commander. So you can have this, if you have your starter deck, you can have your unique cryptid in your companion zone. So basically, what this means is, even though I'm playing a little bit bigger than Yu-Gi-Oh! Or the 40 card deck, or MetaZoo with the 40 card deck, well, most MetaZoo decks are 40 card decks, you can have your main big boy, your Mothman, or Bigfoot, easy to access default in your companion zone. So again, lowering the difficulty of the game as is. So I do like some of these features, like the small things, like how you get your Mothman in your companion zone right away, not having to worry about building your land base with the lantern system they have. So these things lower how difficult the game is to deck build, which is always good in my opinion for the most part if you're trying to attract new players. But okay, so yeah, that's some specific nerdy detail stuff about thoughts on those mechanics. 7 cards is your initial hand, so pretty standard stuff like Magic, MetaZoo, etc. There we go. Draw 1 lantern. So the curve of this game is going to be a little faster than MetaZoo or Magic the Gathering, because you will actually get to start with a lantern initially, and then you get to play a lantern again per turn. So this basically makes your 2-cost cards a little bit well, it makes basically makes higher drop cards a little bit faster to play, basically. So you get to play your higher drop cards faster. So because of that, if you're playing a 5-drop card, that card is probably going to be pretty good in this game, because you can play that card pretty quickly. It basically means that if we can play our 2-drop cards faster, or 3-drop cards faster. If we see like a 6-drop card in this game, it has to be pretty good. It has to be pretty good to compensate for it being 6-drop in general, because we can play 2 drops right away, 3 drops, next turn. So that's something to think about. We have to think about the curve of the game and how much better we have to make these higher cost cards to be relevant in general. But then again, we are getting 1 lantern per turn, so that is something to consider about the cost of the game, or the cost of how good these cards have to be depending on their cost. Okay, so we have this active camper, resolve start of day. So basically we have pretty standard card game stuff. There's some action phases going on here, camp phases. This on site, you can kind of see that there is a battle modes like attack and defense, kind of like Yu-Gi-Oh! In this game, and that's kind of something to talk about as well. This game kind of takes a lot of the good elements, if you will, of card games, or the fixed versions of the card game. So back again, talking about the Magic the Gathering land system. I was kind of fixed by the Hearthstone design, fixed quote unquote, at least easier to understand. Attack and defense, similar to Yu-Gi-Oh! MetaZoo didn't really have attack and defense mechanics. That's more of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Taking it in there. So I know I'm a big fan of attack and defense personally. Just offers more interesting options for combat and the like. And yeah, so a lot of this stuff does not make much sense if you don't know how to play the game, honestly. And we'll talk about more of these mechanics in depth. But the most important thing is this game has a pretty standard, main phase kind of set ordering and resolution phases. Of the quick start guide, there's kind of the main thing we have to think about in Cryptid Camp, and probably the most interesting part, in my opinion, is how you actually win. So this game doesn't have a life point system, thank God, because honestly, as a card game designer and as a card game player, I'm a little tired of a lot of games being based around you have X life points and you kind of beat the person next to you, make their life points go down to 0. I like games that have kind of a different kind of win condition. So one of my favorite card games is Keyforge, actually. And in Keyforge, it's actually a race game where you actually don't attack other players who actually try to accumulate enough of a resource to build up, you know, to win, right? You have to get enough of these resources to win. Oh, it's a race. This game is basically a race game. It doesn't say it's a race game, but it is a race, right? We're trying to reveal 3 trails, which could be done pretty quickly. If you really think about it, you could reveal 3 trails in about 4 turns, in theory. And we're trying to also get evidence as well. So evidence is kind of a secondary win condition, most likely, or it could even be a primary win condition, depending on how you're playing. So I do like the win conditions of this game, and I applaud the not life point basis. Okay, cabins. Let's talk about the cabins a bit. So honestly, I don't really think this system they have is that intuitive for like the namings, like quartz beating fluorite. I think that's a little hard to memorize for a lot of people. You know, people are pretty used to, say Pokemon, right? Pokemon is like, oh yeah, water beats fire. Then that makes sense, right? Fire beats grass. That makes sense. Obsidian beats quartz. That I gotta kind of think about. Like if I don't know what the rock is, I can kind of see black beating quartz. Like why not, right? But knowing that obsidian beats quartz is kind of specific, right? And I have a little bit of a critique I want to say when we get more into the cabins, but I do think this is not that intuitive. And I also like, okay, off topic, I like how this octagon shape kind of makes a gem also. I think that's pretty thematic at the same time. But I do think this is not going to be super intuitive to understand, hey, what's strong against what. That's my first impression. Now, it is good. It is a good thing that one type or one, what is it called again? One cabin beats only one cabin. I like how, only obsidian beats quartz. That makes it a lot easier to understand the type advantages. Whereas like Pokemon, whole freaking table, like understand, like, steel beats rock, and steel beats fairy. I think, right? And steel beats whatever. Or fire beats ice, fire beats grass, fire beats bug. It's and Pokemon, it makes sense, right? You think of fire like, oh yeah, insects out of fire, right? In general. But in this game, it's really these rock names that I think the thematic is cool, but I also think like they can be hard to understand. Let's talk a little bit about the graphic design of this a little bit. I think these symbols look really cool for these gems, but at the same time, they can be a little hard to read if you're someone who is a little visually impaired. So, I mean, the colors make sense, right? The colors make sense. I'm just saying the symbols could be pretty hard to distinguish among each other. There's probably some kind of thematic, some kind of language system I'm kind of missing out on. But just thinking about an accessibility standpoint, these symbols are kind of hard to read. But they do double encode the symbols. They do have, lapis is blue, corallium is red. I think in general, it's pretty easy to distinguish based off colors. That said, again, if you're colorblind, back to thinking about accessibility, if you were colorblind, could you distinguish lapis and corallium? And again, if you're colorblind and visually impaired, would you be able to distinguish lapis and corallium again? Because look, lapis and corallium, they both have a circle on top. Like they both have circles on top. They both have a little like line slant going on here. So again, I mean, I don't know how much testing they did seeing the accessibility of these icons and colors with people. Again, I'm pretty new to talking about accessibility in card games with visual impairments and the like. That's a new thing for me. I only have a very basic understanding of that, but I do think about that as someone who worked on MetaZoo, and someone who came on MetaZoo after the cards were already in place in their designs, and how the card placement was, how hard it was for people to read sometimes. What's the aura type of the card? What does this icon mean? So those kind of things are pretty important to think about. So yeah, I think compared to Pokemon, I think it's a good simplification of a type system, and it makes some pretty clear balances. It is not, I mean, it's pretty balanced. If you just think about it, this beats this beats this, this beats this. We don't have like weird MetaZoo stuff where water gets countered by 3 types, which if a card gets countered by 3 types, or if a type gets countered by 3 types, that type should probably be a little bit stronger compared to the other types, because that thing will get countered by more stuff, you know. So that's something to definitely think about. But I do think, you know, it's definitely a fine system as is. Okay, so we have some lore stuff to go over. I think this is honestly pretty solid. I think the humans are cool looking, you know, as is. I'm not gonna read these out loud really. I got, because you know I'm more of a gameplay guy, but I think this kind of mottos and gameplay stuff, it does a good job of conveying, hey, you know, these are like the general traits and kind of gameplay you're gonna see of the types. Like I said before, I don't really see them pushing a dual cabin, dual color, if you will, in this first set, or maybe even the near future. There might be a future thing, and in order for them to push dual cabin, you may need the dual color lanterns potentially. Again, the thing is because you can't really, well, actually, I take it back. I mean, you could potentially do dual color in this game because you will always get a lantern per turn as is. I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't build a lantern deck with, you know, the fire and the water lanterns accordingly. You could probably do that. Yeah, you could do that and the ratios would probably be fine as is. Again, I may say some dumb thoughts in this video because, hey, I'm talking one video, ideally one take, like an hour long, on rulebook thoughts on the game and just kind of saying whatever comes to my head, you know. Okay, but anyways, I will say this: if you played MetaZoo at all, it was kind of funny because these types are exactly the types you would see in MetaZoo: fire, water. Well, there wasn't an ice type in MetaZoo, but hey, water had ice elements. If you play MetaZoo, lightning was a type, and wind was supposed to be a future type, so that's kind of interesting. Forest and earth were types, and they had some synergy in MetaZoo also. So yeah, we have some pretty on the nose MetaZoo references going on here to show you. But hey, remember, Cryptid Camp is not MetaZoo; it's a new game, so something to worry about there. Something to think about that also, as is. All right, so here we go. This is going to be a pretty interesting, kind of a longish kind of take here, but the card layout, card design. Card layouts, card design, one of the most important things in card games. If your card layout is bad, it's going to be hard for people to read the card and understand what's going on. So, very first things I kind of notice is there's kind of a lot of stuff on the cards, kind of like MetaZoo. It's not really like, you know, ideally, if I want to keep my game pretty simple, I want to keep the elements like less than 10. Pokemon does a pretty good job of teaching new players because they kind of don't have too many elements. Now that said, if we actually, you know, you get used to the elements, you know, over time as you look at the cards, and a lot of the cards are pretty simple, but it's still a lot of stuff. And I have a critique of some of the elements here, right? So first of all, let's look at the cost. The cost is in the top left of the card. Not a problem with that. Not a problem with that. The problem is how easy is this cost to read on some of the card, like particularly with this quartz. And maybe it's a bad example. Maybe they chose the quartz Labafena as a bad example card of the rulebook because that 3 is hard to read. I mean, maybe it's just me, but if I was taking the card Labafena and trying to read that 3, like in person, it might be hard to read. So, like I said before, accessibility. Now that said, we also see some other gameplay elements. Now, I'm not zoomed in at all, which I don't think I should be zoomed in too much for this video. But Bafana, you know, we have the uncommon. So I'll zoom it in. I'll zoom it in here. Actually, I'll zoom in a little bit. So we see this is a gameplay unique element, uncommon here. This is kind of small. I mean, right? Isn't this a little bit small? Spill my water all over. Just gotta spill that water bottle all over. But yeah, isn't that a little small? The uncommon kind of thing. The uncommon in this game, it's supposed to signify that a card can only be played think 3 of in a deck. Let me see, 3 of, yep, 3 of in a deck. Yep. But that's kind of the thing. Like, this is kind of hard to see. You know, MetaZoo had the deck per spellbook limit, right? And other games, you know, especially games like Slay the Spire or whatever, like games like online, like computer games, they'll say how many cards you can have of it per deck. Lava Fana being uncommon is a gameplay significant card. You know, it's a gameplay significant trait, but it's so small to read. And not only do you have to read, it says uncommon for deck building, but you also need to know what uncommon means in the rules of the game. You know, I understand they're trying to go for lore in the game, and they want the lore to be relevant, but from a gameplay point of view, it's hard to read, I think, for someone, at least for me, it's hard to read and kind of signify, okay, uncommon, it's over here, and it also means street per deck. So that's a small critique there. The having to piece 2 to 2 that uncommon is street per deck and it's in this area here, and may always be in this area here, and the text is pretty small. You know, that's something to think about. We also have, okay, I do like how the quartz is showed in the top middle, and here, you know, whatever we can to say, hey, this is the card's type, besides the coloring, because people can be colorblind, is a good thing. You know, that is a very good thing to have. More of this gameplay, again, all of this is kind of small. I think all of this is pretty small, and I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to get the lore of this card. They want the card to feel alive, right? By having the lore be out there and be in a sentence. It makes it feel like you're reading an entry from like a Pokédex and Pokemon. And that's pretty cool. But again, we're having to decipher gameplay specific information from this small text, and it's kind of, you know, it's a lot of, like, there's a lot of like specific gameplay elements here. There's like 1, 2, 3, 7 gameplay elements here that we could need for our game that are relevant, and it's all in this small sentence here. So it's not really, it's pretty hard to find, I think, you know. We have these keywords here in this game. So we have flyer and stuff. So this is actually not bad. This is pretty easy to read. Reminder text, always good. It being color coded here is good. Attack defense being this black and white contrast. If all the cards are like this, that's really good. We want black and white contrast, easy to read. So I like the font size of that. Flavor text, pretty small. That's cool. You know, I think the flavor text is as small as the gameplay specific text. This kind of subtext here, which is kind of interesting. I think, why is the flavor text the same? You know, why is this subtext the same size as this flavor text? When this is a gameplay information, it's pretty important for deck building. But you know, maybe that's just me. You know, I'm all about trying to make the game as easy to understand and read for players. You know, if possible, if we can do that. You know, as is. By the way, shout out to Pepper DeLuca, my good friend and artist. Solid art, my friend. Solid art, lots of detail. And yeah, I think this text box is okay. It's really like this top box is kind of clunky. And okay, this is pretty clunky. Like, why is this battle advantage so small? Like, it's really hard to read versus fluoride plus 2 attack. Like, it's such a, you know, if I was someone looking across the table, right, it would be hard for me to figure out, hey, this thing is an extra thing. Like, it's so small to read. Maybe on paper it's not that hard to read. I could be wrong, but first impression, that's pretty hard to read. So again, I think the whole kind of rant here is card text being kind of small, card text maybe being hard to read based off contrast of the color, and also interesting clunky placement of the wording. So it's a lot of text and wording, you know. But I will give some praise to this actual main box. The main box here is relatively easy to read. And I do like how, you know, the creature is up front and center, not really a background, just hey, here's the creature, it looks cool, you know. So I think that's fine. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the thing about this is like it's a little worrying because the thing about these kind of card placements is you can't really change. It's really hard to change these kind of card placements, like where the text is and stuff after a game is made. You can do some small changes, but I think, you know, if this is how they're gonna keep things up for the future, I just worry about accessibility, you know, and reading cards in general, and trying to decipher, you know, cards, you know. And yeah, I mean, look, I'm talking a lot about accessibility if you're looking at this video, you're watching the whole thing so far. And I am not visually impaired at all. I don't really have any, you know, any main big impairments going on, but I'm just really big about trying to make card text, you know, easier to understand in card games, you know, good contrast. You know, we want cards to be easy to understand if possible, you know. So if we can do it, you know, let's try to make it happen, you know. But yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna zoom out a little bit here. We got card types, you know, pretty standard, 6 card types going on. I really wish there was pictures of the cards in the card types. That's just me personally. I wish that was there, but it's fine. Cryptids are your main battlers. Help you gather evidence. We need evidence to win the game, so cryptids are your primary win con. And you actually put them face down. And this is kind of an interesting thing. So in this game, we kind of put everything's kind of a trap card. You know, this game is basically trap cards and Yu-Gi-Oh on steroids. You know, that's why I think about it. Everything's a trap card, and you have placement matters, you know, of your trap cards, basically. And yeah, I mean, you're going to be using cryptids to win and putting them down. You know, I think it's pretty thematic how all of them can be traps and you have to reveal them. I think that's cool. I would have liked, again, to see the trails. The trails are, again, kind of interesting. Like, at the beginning of the game, you get to put 6 trails down, and the order kind of matters, kind of doesn't. I mean, it does matter where you put your trails down, because here's the play area of the game. So, basically, if we imagine this was reversed, right? If my opponent had a creature here, they could, you know, in this opposite area of assuming 2 playmats, they could explore adjacently to my 2 area. So you want to have your best trails probably in the back. Like if you have trails with like effects that help your opponent out, you want to put it in the back, this back row here, usually. So that's something to think about as is. But yeah, trails. We don't have any trail cards to kind of give an idea to people like, hey, this is what this trail does. It does this effect. You know, that would be nice to have pictures of trails in the rulebook. But again, first iteration, can't say too much there. Memories are basically actions or sorceries, you know, from your hand. CZOs remind me of Pokemon supporter cards, I believe. Once per turn, can only be used. Environments are field spells, so you know, pretty standard card games. If you've played any card games, any of the big 3, this stuff is pretty familiar. You know, got your lanterns going here. I don't know if it's just me. We're gonna see if you see in the rulebook, lanterns are off if they're they're off if they're vertical, but they're on if they're horizontal. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Like when I see a lantern and I see it's upright, I think it's on, but I can kind of get the idea of it, you know. I don't know. It's something to get used to. Off and on, off and on. Like, you know, on being horizontal. You'll kind of see it later on. Supplies. I don't really get the point of the supplies and the caches yet. I think on my first read through the rulebook, it's kind of hard to see like why you want to put supplies in a cache, but maybe it's just me. Traps are like, you know, perhaps kind of good because again, the goal of the game is you don't want like the goal of the game is you're having these trails, right? These 6 trails you put here, and you don't want 3 of your trails to be pulled over. So you want to protect your trails with cryptids and traps and that kind of stuff. So I think it's cool thematics and cool potential gameplay we got going on here. I'm gonna scroll back real fast, but I don't think. Do we have anything to both canvas draw a card? One lantern, place the face up in the zone. After the first turn, only the active. Okay, so that's interesting. So they, unlike other card games, they don't really have like, first player doesn't draw. Instead, we're gonna have like the first player only gets one lantern, basically, and then the second player will get an extra lantern. So the second player is gonna have like a one lantern above the first player, if I'm reading that correctly. So that is pretty good. After the first turn. So after the first turn, we will be getting like lanterns in return. But I think the first player, if I'm reading this correctly, only gets a lantern. Second player will have 2 lanterns. So the curve is a little bit different for 2 players. Okay. So yeah, I just wish there were like card pictures here, honestly, for this kind of stuff. So playing a game, again, the goal of the game is you want to be getting evidence, 10 evidence. You get evidence by creatures exploring, these cryptids exploring, and there are these trails here. You're trying to basically, you don't want 3 of your squares to be explored. That's kind of the thing. You don't want 3 different squares to be explored. If someone can like repetitively explore 1 square, and that gets them more evidence, but you don't want 3 of your unique squares to be explored, And these areas, these squares are going to be the easiest to explore. The one in your first row, but these are going to be the hardest to explore, So something to think about there. Again, lanterns and trails don't go in your main deck. So again, that might be a little hard for players to understand. It's not one main deck we're going to have, like Magic, for instance. We have kind of like these 2 side decks a little bit, like a 6-card side deck with the trails and a 10-card side deck with the lanterns. And then we have a 50-card main deck. So it could be a little bit for new players to kind of understand, okay, I got to track maybe 3 different decks going on. So you can look at your discard pile anytime. That's really good. We have the sites, the 6 sites I said before. You can have, so again, with these sites, you have these trails on there, but we also have the cryptids can be put on the site. So the cryptids can essentially cryptids trap, whatever, can protect the sites a little bit. And you want to be kind of like putting your own traps down to keep your own sites alive and protected. We can also move our entities. They call it entities. I am a little confused myself on the difference between an entity. I mean, let me just check real fast. Entity. Entities. Is there an entities definition? I'm curious why they say entities versus cryptid. I think maybe they mean entities are just the face down stuff. I'm not too sure. But yeah, hidden entities. I guess hidden entities are the name for like the face down cryptids. When they're face up, they're cryptids. Okay, so hidden and okay, so I guess this is where it is. So hidden entities. So we're calling entities. Entities is short for hidden entities, and they're basically face down and empty sites. And you can basically keep moving your hidden entities around, essentially. So I guess if you have a trap card or a cryptid, you can kind of move it around adjacently. But your cryptids can only explore if they're not hidden. You have to be face up to kind of explore. So that's kind of a thing. And each site has its own location number. So honestly, I think this game might be a little bit of a challenge to play without a playmat because you need location numbers. Like you don't really see many games with zone numbers. Like if I'm playing Magic, I don't need a zone number. It's just played on the field, right? If I'm playing Yu-Gi-Oh, yeah, I do need zones, but my zones aren't really numbered in Yu-Gi-Oh. They are labeled, but the labeling behind them is pretty, intuitive, right? Monsters up front and the spells in the back. That makes sense. The labeling in this game, where I have to know my numbers, may be a little bit, unintuitive. But that said, if I know it's mirrored, like like chess, right? Like I know, hey, my zone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If I know it's mirrored like that, it may be easy to understand, but I don't know if it's mirrored. It might be like, hey, 1 is over here because it's reversed, you know. So it's kind of, you know, you're gonna have to. This game is much easier with a playmat to play with, I think, because of the numbering on the zones. Which is why I ordered 2 playmats for my Kickstarter. That's how I will say that. That is why I did that. Again, companion zone, very good. Get to play Mothman turn 5 on curve, like, or turn 4, whatever, as is. So pretty good. I don't really understand the cache system, why it's important gameplay wise. I mean, passive effects, that's right. So passive effects can be activated. The problem is I don't really have any examples of the supply cards to kind of wrap my head around yet. So when we see those, it'll make more sense. But if it has passive effects or active effects, I guess that makes sense. Environment zones or field spells, basically. Okay, so it's pretty standard, you know, stuff if you play card games. How to win. So back to how to win. Evidence 10. 3 of arrivals, camp trail. So we're trying to target essentially 3 different squares, zones on the map, and trying to flip them up to win the game. And I could see the main strategy trying to focus in on the front row if possible, because that's the main row you can target. You can only like explore 1 square away based off what I've said, or based off what the rulebook says. So because of that, we are going to be putting cryptids mostly in the front rows if possible. But we will see that there are cryptids that can explore outside of the front rows, and that is going to be relevant for making good cards. It's also interesting how we have you automatically lose scenarios, so you know you can deck out in this game. You can also have illegal reveals, which MetaZoo had that. You kind of need this mechanic in there because someone can cheat, essentially. But again, the way the game is written right now, you could still cheat in theory. Like, you put a hidden entity down, and then you win the game, and then you find out that your entity is actually, oh, whoops, my bad, it was actually a lantern after the game. Or you don't have to reveal it. So you could cheat after the game ends, but it's not really like a big deal, I think. You know, I foresee this game being kind of fast, a little bit, like, in theory it could be pretty quick. Like, games could end in like 5 turns if done correctly, if you're playing well. When you get to that turn 5 mark, you know, power spikes are pretty big from what I've noticed a little bit. So yeah, games can end pretty quickly, and that's good for best of 3s. So anyways, each camper rolls a die. 6 trail. Okay, so this is a critique I had. If this one thing this rulebook needs added, it's this. How do you mulligan? The game has the mulligan word on here once, but I'm gonna fact check myself live right now, and there's only 1 instance of mulligan in the entire rulebook. It doesn't describe how to mulligan. The thing about mulliganing is different for all card games. Like, there's the old school mulligan where I just, you know, shuffle back my deck, draw 7 or draw 6, you know, draw X -1. But we also have Magic doing like the London mulligan system now, which is basically I shuffle my deck, you know, I shuffle my hand to my deck, and then I draw 7 again, and I put X cards in my hand in the bottom of my deck in order of my choice. You know, I'm a big fan of the London mulligan system, personally. I think it's a really good, fair system for the most part. Better than the old school systems, in my opinion, which could be more punishing. So yeah, we definitely need to define what the mulligan in this game is. That's one thing that's missing that we kind of need. If there's one thing they have to add and change, it's this one thing in our book. Okay, so play goes clockwise. It's interesting it goes clockwise, because that would indicate it's probably going to be multiplayer possible for this game maybe in the future. It would be nice if it's multiplayer. Camp phase, adventure phase. I think the phases are kind of interesting, you know, like, I wonder why it's like the start of the day. It's like each day it's So each day I'm doing something, and the next day my opponent's doing something to me. So it's like I'm resting for one day, basically. Like, oh, day begins, and then it ends, and then oh, tomorrow I'm gonna get raided by the enemy camper. I'm gonna get attacked by them. That's the next plan. So I think that's kind of interesting. You know, we draw one card per turn. Pretty standard stuff, honestly, for card games. I like the wordings. By the way, I like how this is exclamation point for how to win, and it has question mark exclamation like how to lose. Like that's possible. You can lose like that. Yeah, that is a little bit interesting. Okay, so we have the camp phase. So I like how it says common actions include, because usually in these phases we want to know exactly what actions we can take and do, but here it says, oh, you could do this and you could do that. That's what this game basically has. So I think that's kind of interesting, honestly. The adventure phase. Okay, I think this is kind of a lot of stuff. I'm trying to figure out. Okay, so the main difference is you can play cards in the camp phase, and then action in the adventure phase. So the difference of the adventure phase and the camp phase is that in the adventure phase you can do one adventure action for each entity you have. So I can move around with the entity if I want to. I can explore, a site. So yeah, I think this game will probably end like 10 turns on average, or potentially, more or less, depending on what it is. It could be fast, but like depending on what they do, it's probably gonna be like a 5 to 10 turn game, because basically what your general gameplay is gonna be like is I play a hidden entity, a cryptid, whatever, and then I'm gonna reveal it next turn, and I'm gonna explore on this turn. I'm going to be doing that. So it has kind of a set sequencing of timings that's going to happen, right? Play a hidden thing, and so I think so yeah. So basically I can basically like play a cryptid, play a hidden cryptid into camp, and I think I can play it the same turn. Let me see again. Get to reveal a hidden entity in this side, play it in the camp. Once per turn, I can reveal the companion cryptid. So I guess you don't have to reveal the companion cryptid in the beginning. What happens if my companion cryptid is not unique? It's a question to have. That is definitely a question to have right there. I want to scroll back up real fast because I want to see how the playing mechanic works. Okay, so it says here I play these cards face down on one turn to play on a later turn. That was the thing I was trying to remember. Okay, so basically what this means is what I would like in the camp phase to be added is I want it signified that I have to play cryptid. Also, where does it say? Okay, so this is kind of a thing. There's no action here listed. There's no action here that actually lists play a hidden entity. They're missing the action that says play a hidden entity, basically. It says earlier on a cryptid you can play it face down and then reveal it later, but that's also not really. I wish that was repeated again. That's really important to understand that you have to play a hidden entity and then reveal it later. So it takes 2 turns to basically get it out. I think that should be stated more easily. It might be something else I'm missing in the camp phase, but definitely needs to say, hey, I can play a hidden entity on this phase as a possible action, and then I can reveal a hidden cryptid. It's I can reveal a cryptid from a hidden entity if it's been out for our turn. That basically needs to be said, I think. Yeah, that kind of needs to be said, actually. Okay, so let's see what else we have here. How to lose. We got phases. Adventure phase. So in the adventure phase, you can do one action. So the actions are move, explore. I think it's a little confusing too. We have adventure action, and then we just have like common actions we can do. So maybe a way to distinguish between, I mean, maybe adventure actions are already enough to distinguish. Maybe, I don't really know, to be honest with you. But yeah, you can only switch your battle modes for that. So this is kind of interesting too. In theory, you could infinitely switch the modes of a Cryptid, like, and then make it act. So there is kind of an infinite loop possibility of just switching back and forth endlessly. So whereas in Yu-Gi-Oh, I think you can only switch once per turn. I think that's the case. I have to fact check myself there. But moving, explore, alternate actions, yeah, that's cool stuff. Okay, so yeah, you basically do one action with all your cryptids and then end the turn. Okay, so maybe, okay, so I think I skipped a little bit too much. So that's actually interesting. Okay, so basically errata everything I said before. I completely missed the end of day step. And before the turn ends, you can set cryptids or traps from your hand face down in any battle mode into empty sites. So I just think it's kind of interesting that you have to put the cryptids at the end of day step, but that also kind of makes sense, I guess. I kind of ended the day with my trap, you know, as is. Yeah. So the reveal step is in the camp phase, but the putting the stuff face down is in the end of day phase. So I don't know. It would be nice if highlighted somewhere basically what the primary point of each phase is. Okay, start of day. The point of this is to, start of day is like, hey, heart of day, draw cards and unlock lanterns. Camp phase, pay for cards and reveal cards. Adventure phase, do stuff with your entities. End of day phase, this is where you play. This is where you get to play your traps and cryptids. As face down stuff. I wish that was like signified a little more in the phases, but maybe that's just me. This is just kind of action stuff, like what triggers stuff, what does not trigger stuff. Pretty important to not trigger actions of the lands. I don't think there's a priority system yet either. Maybe there's no priority in this game except for traps. I don't know. Like, there's no like instant speed I've seen so far, so that's pretty interesting. This is a good graphic, by the way. I like how this is pretty intuitive to understand. I would have also liked this graphic to show you can't go into the enemy space directly unless there's like a term there, but maybe that's just me. And then move to swap. This is good. Okay, you can't move action to enemy territory. Yeah, card effects can override. That's good to know. Yeah, so that's pretty good. This is all good stuff. This is actually a good page for the movement stuff. The exploration. Yep, you gotta have 10 to win. Pretty good. This I think should be. Nah, I mean it's stated enough. Default range is 1 space. I think it's already stated enough. That's pretty good. All right, this is a little interesting, a little complicated here. So we have to declare exploration. I'm trying to see how the resolution of this is. I think you resolve. Do you explore one at a time, or is it all at the same time? That's what I want to know right now. I think. Let me see this here. I think we explore all at once. So yeah, it's based off the wording of this, right? During exploration. Yep. Okay, so I think the way I'm understanding, like, I'm trying to see if it's like magic where you declare all your attackers at once, or do you declare all your explorations, or do you just explore one at a time? You know, that I don't really know. Just from reading this, like it looks like here, all adventure actions, battles are resolved, choose to end. So I really want to say, like, you choose one at a time. Like, let's say I have 3 entities, right? I think I choose one at a time how they would do their order of resolution, but I'm not really understanding that right now. Certain effects activate exploration. Cryptid explores, account as an entity, a trap is triggered. Always check and resolve these effects in the order chosen by the camper whose turn it is. Yep. I think it's one at a time. I think it should be stated like, hey, you can do these actions one at a time. You can do the cryptid effect explores, one at a time. That would be nice. So here, announce which cryptids will explore. Okay, so I think the way this is written is you can choose multiple cryptids to explore one site. Maybe. Either way, yeah, I think that needs to be clarified. Like, hey, is it one cryptid exploring one at a time of a site, or is it I declare all my stuff kind of like Meta? I declare all my attackers and then I do it. I think that should be clarified a little bit more. I think this stuff is fine overall, but there needs to be something that says if I don't pay. So if you don't pay for a trap or cryptid, what do you do? If you don't pay for it, or if you want to pay for it, and if you want to pay for something, a cryptid or a trap, but you can't pay for it, what happens? That should be stated as well. So if you can't pay for it, what happens? Because you have to reveal it, and then you can pay for it. And if you don't pay for it, where does it go? That needs to be there also. Battle begins. We have the battle slip also. We've got the evidence check. So a lot of checks also. Is there a site in your camp? Did your cryptid confront a defense mode cryptid? Was a trap activated? This is also a little ambiguous. I have to check again in the rulebook, but let me see this based off their stats. So maybe it's because my brain is going downhill at this point. It's been a long video or not, but the way I'm understanding this is, you can have your cryptid be in different positions, attack with defense mode. Are you able to attack? So, which cryptids are attacking? Are cryptids attacking based off their mode? Like, if I'm in attack mode, I attack? Or is it just the cryptids that just are attacking based off like the exploration? Are the only attacking cryptids the ones that explored? Because what's the point of being in defense mode and attack mode? It doesn't say here. It doesn't say here that, because earlier we learned that that you can keep a cryptid in attack mode or defense mode, and you can switch to positions on your main phases, right? But it doesn't say here that it's only the exploring cryptid that initiated the fight that is attacking. It just says, hey, all attacking cryptids deal damage simultaneously. So that is interesting. Now I'm trying to wonder what's the point of defense mode anyways. If a hidden entity is present, reveal it. The controller can pay to activate it. Evidence check. So yeah, back to this again. So did you confront a defense mode cryptid? Is the site in your camp? Okay, so I guess this is the point of it. So if I have an attack mode cryptid, they don't say this, right? But if I have an attack mode cryptid, right, I think the point of that is you retaliate against the cryptid attacking and also attack back, right? But if your cryptid is in defense mode, okay, if your cryptid is in defense mode, it will basically prevent, and even if that cryptid is destroyed, it will prevent the cryptid exploring from basically finding evidence. So if you want to prevent evidence from being found, you need a defense mode cryptid. But I think if you want to retaliate, you need an attack mode cryptid, because it doesn't say did your cryptid confront a defense mode cryptid. It said did you confront an attack mode cryptid. Maybe that's completely wrong. But yeah, that might be the case. Okay. More stuff here. If the site has a face down trail and isn't yours, flip it up, applying its effects. So that's the trail thing. I don't know what the trail looks like yet, so that's something to know. Remove all damage from cryptids. Okay, that's fine. So kind of like magic, we don't track the damage tracking. Okay, so based off the point number 7, it looks like each exploration is individual because you can keep doing other cryptid actions afterward. That's pretty important to understand. It's not like I declare all my exploration. I could declare one explore here, one explore there, you know. Okay. Check for any effects. So attacks. So yeah, it says here, basically your attack mode, your cryptid, it's gonna attack. Again, I think the point of I think the point of being in defense mode is to prevent evidence from being found. I think that's the main point, no matter what. So it's not bad. Okay. Patches. Patches is your +1. They call them patches. It's just effects they have. I have a name for it called patches. +1 counters, -1 counters. Pretty standard stuff. Okay, we have these traits here. Unlike MetaZoo, no symbols for traits we got going on. We got Digger. So let's just do a quick review of these traits here. So we got Digger. This is again the location number thing. How is the location number? Is it mirrored based off the player? Like, I think it's pretty interesting how this placement is going to be. So yeah, is it mirrored or not? I think the playmats are the most important thing to have. I think that's you kind of need playmats to have an easy frame of reference, you know, or something like that, if you haven't played the game much. So makes me think, are there playmats, like, you know, paper playmats in the starter decks? Hopefully they are. Digger, but Digger's not bad. I think is location number is where the cryptid is at, right? So if I'm at this square, I can explore the same, you know, if I'm at square number 4, then I can also explore square number 4, right? That's kind of what I'm thinking of right now. Flyer is actually a pretty good trait, explore diagonal sites. It basically, the reason that's so good is, let's say I was in the middle, let's say I was in the middle row of the map. Where is that? The middle row of the map is here. So let's say I was in row number 2. I'll be able to explore row 1 and 3 reverse and 2. So it basically saves an entire move action. Because if we look at the move actions of the adventure phase, that's a whole action to explore. So it basically saves a lot of time. It's a really good trait in this game to just be able to explore without having to move. So that's pretty good. Swimmer can explore the back row sites of this column. This is actually really solid overall. Like, you're able to just, again, explore some. It's really the front row sites that are going to have the most action, but being able to explore back row is really good. Rush is actually a really fun. It's really fun in my opinion. No, I'm thinking of Raid. I'm not thinking of Rush, but Rush. This is actually really good. That's another good tempo play. This is not as good as Flyer. in my opinion, because you have to actually move the cryptid and enter the site, whereas Fly can just sit there and sit back and keep protecting one area if it wants to. So, but it's still good. First Strike, like MetaZoo First Strike, like Magic First Strike. Bloodsucker. Bloodsucker in this game is really freaking good. It's kind of cracked, honestly. So it gives -1 patches. Like, it gives you -1 encounters to the cryptid. And it also gains +1/+1 patches. You know Emilio was working in this game. Shout out to Emilio, by the way. You know Emilio is working in this game because Emilio is the kind of guy who loves Bloodsucker, and you definitely know Emilio made Bloodsucker a good trick. He's like, if I'm working in this game, I gotta make Bloodsucker good. You know, oh man, Emilio's funny, man. But you know he's working in this game when Bloodsucker is so good. It is so good. Lethal's Death Strike or Death Touch, whatever you want to call it, is good. Flash. Flash is way better in this game than MetaZoo because it's guaranteed it cannot attack until expiration ends. So yeah, it basically is a good stall mechanic. I think Raid is actually a really fun mechanic, honestly. Probably the most fun mechanic in the game. I don't know who worked on that, Echo or Gabe, that was you, but you know, whoever worked on that trade, it's pretty good. Be able to go into their camps, pretty solid. Swifts, yeah, so the reason why Swift is good is you're able to just bypass the whole I have to wait a turn to play Cryptid, basically, and then or a hidden entity and then wait for it to reveal it. You know, you get to skip that. But okay. Also, no playtesters in this rulebook, I think, but that would be nice to see, actually. Would have been nice to see that. All right, cool. So, yeah, let's okay, a little bit of recap. That was a lot of talking, a lot of words. My voice is kind of dead from that. I'm not gonna lie. Maybe I should have broken it up into 2 videos, but I kind of wanted to get my thoughts unfiltered, as if I'm learning as a new player still. So, I thought that was kind of useful, seeing hey how complicated is this game. If I basically worked on MetaZoo Games 1, not MetaZoo 2, but if I worked on MetaZoo Games 1 as the R&D director, or like, you know, 5 sets, whatever, and I'm looking at this new game rulebook, how complex is this game to me? I think this game is kind of complex, honestly. I think this, I think it's not as easy as Pokemon. I'm gonna say that. Is it more complex than MetaZoo? I'm gonna say no. I think MetaZoo is more complex in this game. MetaZoo had a lot of traits and a lot of other stuff. Type advantages by itself is more complicated. So this game is probably easier than MetaZoo to play. I definitely think it's unique. I think it's good thematically. I think it can be very fun already. I can see myself like, okay, yeah, let's go explore a bit. You know, let's go see the hidden trap. I think the foundation of the game is good. It's a really good foundation. That said, I do want to hit back to my points earlier. We have some parts of the rulebook missing, like the Mulligan system, you know, and some parts like need to be highlighted more, like the fact that you have to wait a turn to reveal your cryptids, you know. That said, though, that kind of is intuitive because you put your cryptids at the end of the day, but I digress, you know. I think some parts could be more clear. However they choose to fix those parts could be more clear, you know. But yeah, I think the core gameplay of it is good. Just really, it's reading the cards, readability, stuff like that. So let's go talk a little bit. Let's end it off by talking about some of the cards a bit. I have the 8 cards I think they revealed. I think they're the mascot cards of the cabins, honestly. So let's just talk about the gameplay a little bit. Mothman. So Mothman's a 5. These are all 5-drop cards, so they're gonna be pretty quick to get out. Like you get them out. I mean, not quick, but you can get these cards out like fast, you know, in the game. Also, isn't Piazza Bird kind of cracked? Like this card looks way too good. It's a 1-drop to 1 cost card. Okay, I'll talk about that soon. Okay. Mothman. Mothman can, you know, this cryptid can explore any field. Which, by the way, good art for all these art. You know, shout out to Kelsey. Shout out to Lily. You know. Shout out to Nelly, all these people. They all did a good job with the art, you know. And then this is an interesting question. Do I like this Mothman design more than MetaZoo Mothman? I don't know. I think they're both good designs, honestly. I actually like the yellow of this design a lot. But yeah, MetaZoo Mothman's kind of all cuddly, fuzzly a little bit. You know, this Mothman's a little bit more sharp, a little bit more like the pointy edges. Um, Still has the Mothman eyes for sure, like, you know, the kind of the cutesy Mothman, but this Mothman looks a little bit more badass. I mean, I'm sorry to say, like, you know, that this Mothman's a little bit more badass, a little bit more tight, you know. Kind of gives me like Batman versus like, I don't know. Well, you know, yeah, I don't know. Like, you know, first Mothman, MetaZoo, that's kind of like like, I don't know, cuddly Batman, I guess. This is like, you know, hardened Batman, a little bit more Batman. You know, Batman with some experience under his belt. You know, I don't know if that makes any sense, but yeah. So this guy can explore any field. Is that good in this game? That's very good in this game, because what this means is this is basically Flyer on steroids. It doesn't say Flyer the trait, but it is Flyer on steroids, because I can be in the back with this Mothman, and I can be hanging out and very back, and be exploring any field. So pretty good. We do see this Mothman doesn't have the best stats compared to the other 5 drops we're going to see, but it is pretty good, you know, because it can explore any field, and it's just very flexible. And it basically gains an extra evidence each time. So this thing wins the game 5 times faster at the minimum as other cryptids. And it's an Anthem effect, so it's good. It's a good, solid card. These all have bounty 1s. I don't think every creature has bounty 1 in this game, but it has bounty 1. So it is a little worse if it gets killed. Kind of reminds me of Pokemon's EX kind of cost a little bit with the prize cards, but not as good as that, actually. I think it's not as good as that. Karen's a 14-11, so better stats than Mothman for sure. Would definitely whoop Mothman in a fight. But Mothman doesn't want to fight. What Mothman wants to do is hang back and explore pretty easily. That's what Mothman wants to do. It's a pretty good passive card. Pretty good game ender. If they don't have enough cryptids to cover their bases, they're gonna win the game with Mothman, basically. Garen, when allied cryptid explores, may have its attack be equal to this cryptid's attack until that exploration ends. So I think that's actually a really good effect. This guy's 14 attack, and 14 is the highest attack we've seen in the game so far. So you can basically make all your other cryptids have 14 attack, the highest attack in the game. That's pretty good. In my opinion, that's pretty good. Quartz cryptids are immune to effects that would defeat them. So this is really good. This is good against lethal in this game. Good against other card effects, like, I don't know, any kind of like general removal spell. It's pretty solid. And it got extra defense, so it's okay. I still think the Mothman is better than Kirin, because the flexibility of Mothman is actually really, you should not underrate. Basically, if they have one thing that's unguarded, you can just reveal a trail right away. So Mothman's really good just for ending the game quickly. But Kirin, I think, is not bad. It's good for attacking. Hard to say how good combat is in this game right now. La Lorena, another Emilio favorite, I'm pretty sure, which is good. And solid art. Each cryptid in all discard pile. So it's a scalar. It's a +1 attack for all cryptids. Again, I don't know how much combat there is in this game. I don't know if we have much mill effects going on. It's hard to say how good this card pile interaction is right now, but hey, it could be good. I don't know what coaxing means. Okay, coax is not defined. It's no glossary in the rulebook. I wish it was a glossary in the rulebook, but maybe that's just me. And you can just if it's the way I'm reading it correctly, I think you can just put back in a creature once per turn. So it's pretty cracked from that mechanic. A lot of card advantage this thing is giving. But you know, I am Kevin and I like cracked cards, so pretty good. So yeah. Pretty solid card. Is it better than Mothman? It's a little slower than Mothman. Mothman's good because I think we'll just end the game quickly. Like being able to explore sites wherever you want is so flexible in this game. My opinion. So, Fan Meter Visitor has Flyer. Good, very good to have. Flash also good. This denies exploration. Good tempo play. Can go to enemy territory. Really good. Basically, if this thing dies, it gives evidence 2 because of its bounty effect and the other effect. And yeah, all meteorite cryptids have flash. It's a solid card. I think this is probably Yeah, I think Mothman's still the best because of how flexible it is. Honestly, like being able to explore any site is like really good. Like because you end the game quickly by seeing trails, right? If you explore a trail, you're gonna end the game pretty fast. That's kind of the thing. But Flyer is also good, and Flash is just good tempo. And yeah, it's just solid. So I think Van Meter is probably second best. I think Flyer is gonna be really good in this game, being able to see trails. But because I don't know how good attacking is yet. Okay, ideally you don't want to attack. You want to just explore trails you haven't seen yet. So, Bigfoot, kind of an anthem effect. They call it a badge. I think the Rulebook said a patch, so a little bit of a discrepancy there, a little bit of contradiction. They should call it a patch, I think. +1/+1 patch. Good effect. Bigfoot has tied for the best stats in the game. Pretty good stats in general, I think. This is a solid card, I guess. Still not as good as Mothman though. Okay, I don't really know because the thing is, you don't have to win by combat, right? Combat's important for getting past stuff. Don't get me wrong, but with Mothman, you just ignore combat. You just literally go with any site you want, and easy peasy, Snallygaster, Flyer again, lethal, always good. Fulgurite, first strike. So, and it has a card discard effect. So again, really good. Is this better than Van Meter Visitor? Maybe. I think Van Meter Visitor is pretty good actually because it not only protects the site, but it has flyers, so you're able to explore pretty easily and you get to keep a site alive. That's pretty good actually. It's probably second best or first best. So this guy is like a Snallygaster. Like it's a good attacker. Good stats in general, and that's first strike. It's probably going to win every fight, and it's probably going to defeat a Decrypted. So I think it's pretty good. It's probably like third best right now, from what I've seen so far among these guys. Nessie. So again, another contradiction. If you look at the definition of swimmer, where is swimmer at? Swimmer is here. So it can explore the back row sites of this column. It can explore the field in the last row of this column. So they changed the name. It should be back row sites. It shouldn't be field. It should be sites. So we got some contradictions going on. So QA issues. We have QA issues already, which is normal for new card games. But it is something I'm going to bring up because that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring up these to help improve the game. So yeah, QA issues there should probably be fixed at some point. But let's look at Nessie a little more. If you have 10 or more cards in hand, gain evidence too. The question is, how hard is it to have 10 or more cards in hand? I don't know yet because I don't know how much card draw it is. But you have 7 cards in hand. If you play 1 card per turn only, you are basically keeping like 7 cards in hand forever. So maybe it's not that hard to keep 10 cards in hand. But this guy doesn't actually give any card draw, so it doesn't really support his effect. Its attack or its rain effect, however, is really freaking good because if you look at the attacks, it's pretty like on the nose, like 13. So this thing with 12 attack can basically kill almost all these creatures in defense mode. And I keep forgetting the combat system. Is it you have to have more attack than them? Let me check. I think you have to have more attack. A battle occurs. Check for any effects. You turn. Okay, so you have to do. So yeah, you have to deal 12. If it's 12 defense, I have to deal 12 attack to defeat it, which is understandable. So Nessie is a really good. Nessie's honestly a good defender, to be honest with you, because literally none of these guys can kill Nessie. Like if Nessie is in defense mode, none of these guys can kill Nessie without a steroid. Like La Lorena is probably the best one to kill Nessie, but all these guys can't really kill Nessie. You also got, lethal and this guy. So yeah. Okay, Piazza Bird, obviously the best card in the game actually of these because it's cracked. It has one one cost right now. I don't know. That might be a typo. Why is Piazza Bird one cost here? This is actually busted. But probably a typo. Hopefully a typo. But flyer. We put evidence with this cryptid. Find 2+ evidence instead. Corellium cryptids have +5 attack. So already really good anthem effects. Already kind of insane. It finds evidence non-stop all day, all night. Really good stats, 12-12, and it's one cost right now. Hopefully it's a typo. I hope that's a typo on Piazza Bird, because that's really good for a one cost. I'm gonna play that guy turn 1 basically as a hidden entity, and then get that guy out turn 2. So why not? All right. So yeah, guys, this is a long video. But I hopefully I don't know if my friends at Cryptid Camp are gonna read this or gonna watch this video. Maybe, maybe not. I have to cut some parts here and there, honestly. But yeah, I'm gonna try to keep this unfiltered for the most part and just entertaining. So yeah, thanks for watching this video. If you want more Cryptid Camp stuff and indie TCG content like this, first impressions, whatever, subscribe, all that stuff. And yeah, guys, I'm gonna see you all next time. Peace out.